This meeting is being recorded.
Okay. All right, this is the West Fargo Public Library Board of Directors meeting for June 18th, 2020, rescheduled from June 11th. And I now call this meeting to order. Carissa, do you have anything you would like to add to the agenda before we approve the consent agenda?
I have one item that I wanted to add to the regular agenda, and the item is discussion of fine collection for the remainder of 2020 and use of unspent funds due to COVID.
Okay, would you like to do that maybe before or after the budget?
Let's do it as item number 3. So after the budget, I think the things we'll discuss as part of the budget discussion will tie into that, so it'll make more sense if we do it last.
Okay. I am unsure if we need a motion to do that.
Just in case, I will make the motion to add that to the regular agenda at the spot she selected.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion passed. Okay, we'll move on to the approval of the consent agenda. Are there any consent agenda items that should be moved to the regular agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
I'll
Is there a
second.
Okay. And any further discussion? Hearing none, all those approval of the consent agenda, please say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion passed. Carissa, if you would like to lead us off on the review of lease amendment and contract for custodial services.
Yes. So following up on an item that I had mentioned at our last meeting in May on my working with the schools to see if we could amend our lease to be able to afford contract custodial support, which I brought up as an issue that we've had before COVID, but that it became very much more apparent and much more important when things like sanitizing surfaces became more important during the virus outbreak. So currently in our lease, we do have some custodial support, but we don't have any weekend cleaning and they don't do any surfaces in the library, and they're not able to do things holistically like floors and vacuuming at the level and frequency that we need. So we have some support included, but not enough, and certainly not enough in this pandemic situation. So I asked the schools if they would be open to an amendment to our lease to reduce the monthly cost of the lease so that we could afford to find our own cleaning contractor. And I included in your packet their lease amendment that they provided to us and a proposal from a cleaning contractor, and then our full lease, our original lease. So the schools agreed to reduce the yearly cost of our lease by $27,000 a year. And I looked into 3 different cleaning contractors and did walkthroughs with them and sent them a spec sheet for what we would want done 6 days a week. And those vendors were Ambassador Cleaning Services, which is the vendor that the city uses. And they quoted me $3,360 a month. I also reached out to another company called Midwest Professional Cleaning. They quoted us $1,050 a week, so about $4,000 a month. And then I also did a walkthrough with a company called TLC Cleaning, which quoted us $2,900 a month. And they were the only ones that included cleaning supplies in that cost, which is awesome. The other companies would require us to buy our own. And I should mention too that still as part of our lease, I did negotiate to continue to have our paper products in our bathroom and our soap still included, and cleaning supplies as well. because we do have some cleaning supplies that the custodians already use when they do their work in the library. So those things are still in our lease, but obviously there's a gap between $27,000 a year and it would be, I think, $34,000 some dollars a year at $2,900 a month. So, but we're mid-year. So to make up the difference, it'd be about $7,800 difference a year. So at half the year left, we'd have to come up with $3,900. But we have quite a bit of funds that are going to be unspent in terms of materials costs because of our COVID closure. And at this point, we're not going to be able, nor would we want to retroactively spend those funds. What the library service managers and I did when we were planning for our reopening was we made some cost projections based on the remainder of the year. So we're going to have unspent funds in things like our book line. And I'll talk more about that later and what some of those totals will be. But we would definitely have the funds to cover $3,900, the gap between the amount that they're willing to reduce the lease and the cost of the contract cleaner. So I think the only other thing that I will say before I turn it over to you guys for any questions or discussion is it's coming before the library board tonight, and then if approved by you all, then it would need to go to the school board, and then it would go to the city commission as well, because the lease amendment would need to be signed by Bernie Dardis and Tina Fisk, just like the original lease was signed by them as well. So I don't think I forgot anything. So what questions do you have for me?
Research. I don't have any questions at this time.
Seeing a couple people that have dropped off the call. Does it look like that? Yep, there, okay. I think they're rejoining.
Sorry, I've moved to a new location.
That's okay.
My connection dropped twice, sorry.
Oh.
But I'm back now. Okay, sorry.
Carissa, because I was also dropped twice, perhaps you'd like to review everything again. Sorry.
I dropped out when you said you had to make up a $3,900 gap for the rest of this year.
Yep. So that's the difference for the next 6 months between what they've reduced the lease by and what the cost of the contract cleaning support will be. So, and I was talking about how due to our COVID closure, we will have substantial unspent funds in a few different materials lines, and we are not going to and cannot retroactively go back and spend those on materials. So this amount, we would be able to cover it by those unspent funds due to COVID. Okay, so that's how we could pay for that. Yep. Okay.
And then the floor is open to questions if you have any.
Yep. Thanks, Steve.
Carissa, I do have a question. I was looking at the maps today and I couldn't quite identify, where will the cleaning service start? Will you be responsible for cleaning that lobby area with the hard floor, at the bottom of the stairs, at the top of the stairs? What does that look like?
So when I did my walkthroughs with the contractors, I told them that I wanted them to quote us for cleaning from the door following the path that leads up to the actual interior library door, but they wouldn't be responsible for the whole lobby because that's the school's, that's not even part of really property that we're not leasing that. So, but we do need to have consistent cleaning of and vacuuming of our entryway and our steps and stuff like that. So I did say, okay, starting here is where I would like you to, mop the floors and vacuum the steps and that kind of thing. And then just leading up into the library the whole way. And then we just did the full tour once we got in there, including things like the elevator bay and stuff like that. So
Do you think that that is clear with the school too, just to be sure that that area isn't left unclean?
the lobby,
Yeah, just to make sure that they don't say you're supposed to do it. I mean, is that really clear with the school?
I can clarify that with them. I don't think that we discussed the lobby. But that's something that I can follow up with them on that. Now that you brought up the maps, because I'm assuming that's maybe where your question comes from. I don't know how precise, now that you bring that up, if the lobby, is it on the map that's included in our lease or is it not?
I'm not sure.
Hold on 1 second, I'll look.
Okay.
It's never looked dirty to me in entering the library, so I'm assuming that the current contract or previous contract's been cleaning it.
Yeah, I think it was all the same people for the whole building though. That's why I want to ensure that we aren't responsible for something that we can't maybe do when it needs to be done or as often.
Yeah, and with the change in discussion of custodial services, it might be a good idea just to be really clear about what the library's new contract is going to cover explicitly.
I believe it is on the map, but I don't know that they can really segment that off anyway for a map. I wonder if it's listed anywhere in the lease itself, the current lease. Well, I can tell you one thing is that I've never been under the impression that we were ever to be able to use that lobby for our use. So my understanding was always that it's not part of the library, but it's our entrance. So, there's that aspect of it because there are other entities, like currently right now, the YMCA is set up temperature checking people there before they take kids down to daycare. And we have another city entity, the police department has an office off of that lobby. So there are multiple entities that use that lobby. So it really would not be fair for us to pay to clean the full lobby. And I certainly was not going to instruct the contractor to clean the lobby. So what steps do you feel are necessary to have that clarified, or what are you comfortable with? I don't think that would be sorry, go ahead.
My opinion would be that we can probably, if the board decides to move forward with the approval of the custodial services, that we can do a motion and just have it be pending clarification that the library is not responsible for cleaning the hard surfaces of the lobby, just so that the process can still move forward. But I do want to be clear. I mean, I know that what you're saying makes sense, but we have to make sure that both entities or all the entities in the building understand what those rules are. Does anybody else have thoughts?
I'm afraid I do. Since the building belongs to the school and the lobby is part of the building, the lobby is the school district's responsibility.
Yep.
If they want to, I don't know how unreasonable they are. So they may want to come back and say, well, everybody who uses this entrance has to chip in, which I think would be unreasonable.
And I don't think that based on the conversations you've had that that's really on the table. I just want to be sure that the contract as it's, because we're amending the lease, that's clarified in the lease that we are not responsible for that. I agree with everything you said, Larry. Are there any other questions regarding the contract? So should we make a motion to approve the lease amendment and contract for custodial services pending clarification of lobby area? I'm not really sure how to phrase that last part.
Yeah, I'll make the motion to approve pending the clarification of the lobby cleaning area.
I'll second that.
Okay, I've been interrupted temporarily. There has been a motion. Is there any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in, Jody, could you take over the vote for the motion, please?
Sure. Okay, so after the motion was seconded, everyone in favor say, please say aye.
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 Anybody opposed, same vote? Okay, then the motion passed as stated. The second item on the agenda is review of the proposed budget for 2021.
I'm going to share my screen. Everybody.
Please do.
Can you see it? Let me know when you can see it.
Yep.
You can? Okay. Okay. Well, I am excited to be sharing a draft of our 2021 budget proposal. So tonight, I'm not gonna be asking for approval of the budget yet. This is just for your review of the draft and so that you can give me any feedback and ask any questions that you have. And then at the July 9th meeting, that's when I'll actually ask you to approve the budget. And then our budget is, of course, included in the overall 2021 city budget draft with the rest of the city departments. And a preliminary draft of the city budget is going to go before the commission for feedback and questions on Monday, August 3rd. So that's kind of the timeline of next steps. So the different sections of my presentation are going to, I'm going to talk about requests and why those requests and or increases are being asked for. And then I'm going to talk about our revenue. And then I'll talk about some areas where we were able to see some cost reductions. And then we'll discuss the question of our reserve fund. So you can feel free to ask questions as we go. And I have many slides in here that have one word questions on them so that we can stop as we go between each section and we can address any questions that you have at that time, or I can jot down any feedback that you have. So yeah, please feel free to jump in as we go, and I'll do my best to answer your questions or get answers to your questions after the meeting. So I want to step back a little bit and talk a bit more about all the work that has already gone into this. So not just next steps, but the things that we've already completed. So we started internal discussions about the budget at the beginning of the year. So really in January, the library service managers started providing me with input into future staffing needs. And then in March and April, I asked the library service managers to also evaluate materials needs, so technology and programming and collection, both physical and electronic, and marketing and furniture and equipment. So they worked alongside me on those things, and Along with that, I did my own budget analysis of past year's spending to see where the trends are up or down in certain lines. And then I put together a budget and sent it to finance, and then they got back to me with some initial numbers that reflected what we asked for. And then subsequent to that, I was able to review that. And then I met with Commissioner Jardevig and Tina Fisk and Jim Larson, the finance director, and we discussed justifications for any requests, areas to cut or postpone certain things, and also then, of course, what could be done about that gap between our current mill count or mill levy and our operating expenses. And then just a lot of drafts in between, back and forth as well. I think I was still working and getting information even last Friday on this most current version that you have. So now we're here. So as I thought about it and stepped back and thought about what I think we are accomplishing with the items that I'm requesting if approved, one thing is that I think this budget request will accomplish reducing barriers and access to the library. One thing that I'm going to talk to you guys about is elimination of overdue fines, which is a financial barrier to using the library for many. And another thing that I'll talk about this budget supporting is it will help us leverage more partnerships that will allow us to bring library services outside of the library. So the staffing request that I'm going to talk about will enable us to partner more with the schools and also get off-site and offer off-site programs with stronger partnerships with entities like the Little Red Reading Bus. And the other thing, I kind of already touched on it, but the other thing that this budget request would support is closer partnership with the West Fargo Public Schools to support youth success. And right now, we have done an amazing job in service to that infant through elementary school age range, but there are like 12,000 students in our school district, and half of them are in 6th grade through 12th grade. And at our current staffing level, that group is really underserved by the library, but they also have a lot of needs. And just even in the last 2 months, multiple library service managers at the middle schools and high schools have reached out to us and wanted to partner with us in different ways and help them fill some gaps, such as literacy needs during the summer and getting library cards to entire bodies of students at certain grade levels and things like that. So there are needs there and gaps that we can help fill in and work in partnership with the school district. It's just not something that we've been able to do with the number of FTE that we've had in youth services, and I'll talk more about that. So these are the two bigger picture things that I think that this request would support if approved.
Have any of those staffers come forth with any grant? Is there any grant money for those type of opportunities?
Yeah, there's many ways that we can partner with the schools, certainly in programming opportunities that could be accomplished through grants, certainly. One thing, this is kind of a tangent, but since you asked, I might as well talk about it. One thing I had been working with the schools on a grant that would help fill the gap in internet access that's still going to exist with all this uncertainty about how kids are going to be able to connect if online education continues, and just how emphasized that digital divide is and was during COVID when people couldn't do things like come into the library to do their homework and use our internet. I mean, I don't know that that's necessarily exactly what you're asking, Larry, because maybe what you're getting at is sort of how can grants be leveraged to accomplish some of those programs, which is kind of a different topic, right? Because the scale of serving an entire segment of youth, we can offer programs through grants and have some of those facilitated that way too. But what my request is more about is us just not really being able to serve a diverse youth at the current staffing level that we have. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but potentially when I get to it, the things I'll say later will, or if not, you can jump in with more questions too. Before we dive into that, I don't know that I've ever shared some trend data with you guys, but now is kind of a good time to look at how use of some of our services have really increased over the years. And some of these items tied directly into things that I'll talk about later in my presentation. So library visits over a 5-year period have increased by 34%. We've seen an increase in total circulation of materials, so that combines physical and electronic. And we've seen a huge increase in circulation of electronic materials over the last 5 years, and then also a substantial increase in program attendance as well. So I just thought now is a good time to kind of talk about some of those trend highlights. So requests. So tonight I'm going to highlight 4 main request areas, and I'm going to talk about these are areas where we'd like to see an increase in 2021, and I'll talk about why that increase is being requested. And so those areas are staffing, professional development, rental and custodial support, which you guys, we already talked about that, so you're in the know on that one already, but I included it. And then our Odin membership. Those are the 4 most substantial areas of increase on the budget as a whole, and we can stop and we can talk about any other areas that you have questions in as well too. So first thing is staffing. So like I mentioned, the budget draft that you guys received has increases in salary and benefits line that reflect the addition of a full-time children's services librarian to the WFPL staff that would report to the youth services manager. So this position would support a growing demand for youth programming at the WFPL. If you look at the chart on the right, that shows our program attendance trend starting in 2005 to 2019. So basically from 0 to over 15,000. And we had our most, last year was a record-breaking year for our program attendance. And you can really see what has driven that program attendance based on the children's program attendance trend line is very much, it mirrors the overall trend. So that group has really driven the attendance. And in 2015, you can see that it took an increase up, and that's when we hired our first dedicated youth services staff person. That was when we hired Lauren Nephew, the youth services manager. So you can see what we were able to offer at that point that we couldn't. This position would allow us to offer programs at more optimal times of day and days of the week. We have 2 FTE dedicated to youth services. So we have our youth services manager and we have our programming assistant in youth services. But there's only so many hours a week that they can work. And so when we have programs on certain days and nights that might be good times to have them for people, we are not as able to offer programs on the weekend, for example, which is a good time for folks to come in for programs when they're busy during the week. Another thing that this position would support would be working with those community partners that I talked about. So we are doing an awesome job partnering with our daycares locally. So this position would do that. And then they would also offer offsite programs like I talked about. So story times at the Little Red Reading Bus and things like that. And again, this position would really be about helping us sustain that work that we are doing right now with infants through elementary age students or children. And that would allow our youth services manager to build those relationships with the schools and understand the needs of older youth, that 6th grade approximately through high school age range, that are really underserved by us right now because we haven't been able to build those connections and analyze the needs and then also execute the programs with the FTE that we have. So this position is being requested so that we can do both of those things. And at our current staffing level, we just can't. I should also point out too that so this job is a librarian position. So I talked a lot about the programming, but this person, as part of their work, would have hours per week that they would work at our public service desk. So they'd do things like supporting people in looking for jobs, working on homework, filling out applications, help with technology, that sort of thing too. The only other thing that I will say about this is that originally in my request, I had asked to add a children's services librarian and an adult services librarian. And very much like I talked about with the children's services librarian and how, you know, from infant to 18 years old, there's a lot of diversity in there. Like that's not a uniform group of needs right there. And adults are very much, it's similar in that way, right? I mean, there's a huge range of needs, educational and recreational literacy needs between age 18 and seniors. Huge. So we have a similar kind of issue in meeting those needs of adults as well. We have been able to build great connections and meet needs of seniors in West Fargo, and we've done a lot of programming geared towards that audience, but there's also other adult audiences that we see in the library and that we know have educational needs, but we just aren't really able to build those connections and plan a lot of programming for them. So parents and new Americans and job seekers, and there's just a huge range, obviously, among adults. So, and I'm just pointing this out because I wanted you to know that I did request it and I asked to see the numbers, but until you ask and find out what the full salary and benefits package is going to look like for these positions, you don't really know what the total is going to be. And so I asked for that and reviewed it. And then I had my meeting with Commissioner Jardavig and Tina Fisk and the finance department. And we ultimately decided that that was just too high of a number to ask for in 1 year with both of the positions. So I told them that, you know, the most pressing need is the children's services librarian, but that the adult services librarian, you know, that need's not gonna go away. So it's definitely it's gonna be a postponed thing that I would imagine will come back around. It's not a need that's gonna go away, but I did want you to know kind of how that played out and how we landed on the one FTE ad that I am asking for. So I also wanted to include this too, because I don't know if I have shown you the most recent figures on this. We have about 10,000 cardholders at WFPL. Most of them are adults. A large portion of them are children. And that tiny segment is our youth. And that's the group that we're talking about, that, you know, we've had inquiries from the schools about really working with that group and getting them cards and things, but we need to do a lot more to engage them. Okay, so I feel like I talked for a while, so I don't have my question slide up, but I'm definitely willing to pause and take any questions on the staffing piece of it before we move on to professional development. Or I can just keep talking until we're done and I hit my question slide. It's up to you.
I think you should keep on going.
Yes.
I will do that. I'll keep on. Okay, so
I'm in favor of all this stuff.
Okay, so my next piece is professional development, which does see a pretty substantial increase if you look at on the budget, right? But that is because we have been so severely lacking in any training for our staff and paid professional development and memberships in professional organizations. And so this budget request represents memberships for our librarian positions and library service manager positions and director. And
Carissa,
it also, yep, sorry.
When you say staff, do you mean librarians and people who aren't librarians?
Yes.
Okay,
So
thanks.
specifically, I'll try to clarify. So with the dollars that are represented in this budget that I prepared, I budgeted for professional memberships for our circulation supervisor, communication specialist, library director, me, library service managers, and then the new librarian position. So memberships, one professional conference a year, one remote training a year, and then I also budgeted not for all of those individuals, but a handful of online trainings that are more course oriented. They're longer than a webinar. So that's what was included in total that comprises this dollar amount. And to further clarify too, the training opportunities are going to be found in the travel and education line. The memberships are their own line that's called memberships on the budget. So thanks for asking that. I hope that clarifies a little bit more. Obviously, all of our staff need training, and we do a lot of staff training staff, right? Because that's part of what managers do, is they have responsibility in leading and training their staff. But even in order for them to be able to do that well, we need to continuously help them improve too. So that's what a lot of this, that ties into it as well. So I think really it comes down to the service that residents can expect from us is completely tied to development and resources that we put into our staff. And our users expect us to be innovative in our programs and services, and they expect excellent customer service, and they expect us to be technologically savvy, and they expect to see collections that represent themselves. And so in order to foster the kind of skilled staff that can do those things, the only way to do that is to invest into their development. And so my goal is to foster an internal culture of continuous improvement. And I don't want managers and staff to stagnate. So staff do need to be exposed to a network of professionals that will prompt them to continuously think critically about the services that we offer. And so that's why the trainings and professional memberships are so important. And training really in our field is tied to attending conferences. You just learn a ton when you're able to take advantage of those opportunities. So that's why the request is being asked in that line. And before we were just so underfunded in that area. So that's why it's looks so dramatic.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah. Yep, go ahead.
I'm just wondering, I support travel and training for everybody. I'm just kind of wondering where this number came from, if it's compared to other libraries, if it's compared to other city budgets. If you could just share a little bit about that, maybe.
Sure. I would say that it is compared to, yes, certainly membership and professional organizations, something that other libraries offer their staff. Not necessarily every staff person at, in every corner of the organization, but that's something that's very common in libraries. Offering staff travel to one regional or national conference is also something that's very common in libraries, because like I said, it's really, the conferences are training. They're like a week-long training. That's what that is. And then the other piece of it is things come up throughout the year where staff start a new project, or they go out and start trying to develop a new service, and they need some extra training to kind of bolster that. So there's a need for the ability for a staff person to take a webinar or a training that they do, let's say, over the course of a month on a specific topic. A good example of that is this year we ventured into starting to use something called an acquisitions system at the library, which has never been something that WFPL used before, but as our services have matured, there's a need for that. So it's a way for us to receive materials and really track our finances and expenditures really closely for our materials budget. And so the staff person that was in charge of implementing that, both she and I felt like, you know, we need to learn more about this and do the best that we can with it. So we were able to support her and getting a 3-week, 4-week training online through the American Library Association in acquisitions management. And from there, it was just, you know, we can go. So we have so much expertise on our staff, but the field is vast. there's always new things, and nobody knows everything. So it's that continuous improvement piece of it.
I also, oh, sorry, Steve, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I'm in huge support of this. I think this is a wonderful idea, but if you need to justify this in any way, I wonder if someone in HR could get you some sort of data or point you in the right direction in terms of like staff satisfaction or happiness or even retention. Mm-hmm. You know, when you provide staff with these kinds of education and proper training and continuous exposure to experts in the field, there has to be that kind of supporting data out there. I would think that
that's a great idea.
Point you in that right direction.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's a good thought. It's just, we all support this. It's just, I think some of the questions are geared around how can we appropriately explain and defend our decision to the public, especially the national travel, especially in the coming year, just because, you know, in case a news organization had a slow day and they advertised that West Fargo budgeted all this money, library, for national travel right after COVID. I think we're just trying to think of different ways to be able to defend our model up front. One idea, was there any retention issues that were submitted on exit interviews? So her question was good for retention. Mm-hmm. How about for exiting employees? Was there anything specific that we can document for the city that said, you know, that was one of the reasons maybe you lost a qualified staff member?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I don't see national travel opening up anytime soon, especially in library land. The American Library Association annual conference this year has gone all virtual, and I would expect that midwinter will be the same thing. Until a vaccine is available, I don't see people climbing on airplanes.
Yeah.
Well, Carissa, maybe we can move on for a little bit, and if we have more questions, we can jump back to that. But
that's perfect. Yep.
I think Steve did a good job of explaining our position, that we all are very much supportive of it, but want to make sure that we are spending the dollars wisely.
Sure. Yep. So my last two items are quick. We already talked about why the increase in the building rental line is there. I'm going to actually ask them to correct that, because what they did was they subtracted out the 27,000 and they added in the 34,000 some in the same line. But it's a little misleading, right? Because that's not actually the cost of our lease once it'll be amended. But so I just wanted to include that, but we already talked about that. So unless anybody has any questions, I won't say anything more about that. And then Odin, I just wanted to point out why there was an increase there. So it was brought to my attention, and before actually even I became director, I knew about this because I knew that it was an issue before. So Sandra had told me that Odin had been undercharging us for a while. They had the change in leadership, and I should back up even more. Odin is our consortium that supports our library management software. Online Dakota Information Network is what Odin stands for. So we pay to belong to a consortium so that we don't have to stand up the library management software ourselves, and we can get support through them, and we can do resource sharing with libraries across the state. So I should have said that first, so I'm sorry. That's what Odin is. But so we pay to be a member, right? And they had a different director for a while who was undercharging us. I'm not really sure why. I don't know the full history. When the new director took over, they had developed a new membership schedule. So now libraries are kind of being corrected into that schedule, which is based on numbers of items that you have in the library, because that has a total load on the system overall, and the number of patrons that you have. So the current director of Odin let me know that really we should be paying about $20,000 a year, but that's such a dramatic difference between what we had been paying, that over time we can incrementally increase. And so this year, we would jump from 7,000 this year to 12,000 in 2021. And we should be paying around $20,000 a year. So instead of increasing all at once, we can incrementally increase it. Odin provides us a lot, because if we were not partnering with a consortium, we would need FTE to stand up a system like that on our own. So we get technology support through them and support for training. And just in order to implement your own library system like that, it is a very substantial financial investment. So this is, in my opinion, it's a good model for us. So that's the reason for the increase in that line. And now I will go to my question slide. And if there are none, I will keep going.
I have one question about the technology line on your budget.
Yes.
Can you break down for me the 50% cut that you have in that budget line a little bit more?
Yes, I will. I have a slide in there for that in in cost reduction. So I'll get to that.
Sorry.
If that. No, you're good.
Ahead. Sorry.
It's all good.
Okay.
Good eye, Jody.
Did you have anything, Alana, in your list that was an increase thing that I hadn't hit on yet?
Nope, you have addressed the increases, and it looks like the rest of them that I noted are substantial decreases. So I will wait.
Okay, sounds good. Next thing before we talk about those decreases, we'll talk about revenue. So this year, or for 2021, I'm going to propose that we go fine-free at WFPL. This is a map that shows many of the libraries in the United States that are either partially or completely fine-free. And a big part of the reasoning that libraries go fine-free is because fines make a person's ability to, or a person's use of the library really hinge on their ability to pay, which is not an equitable way for us to provide library services. That's not what we're here for. We're not here to only allow people who can pay to use our services. And many libraries have discovered that fines disproportionately impact children and community members with the least financial resources. So when I started working on the budget, I started it without fine revenue. And the current draft that you have does not have revenue from fines in it. So I'll first talk a little bit about fines at WFPL so you can know more about that and the trends with fines at our library. So our fine revenue has steadily decreased, and there are a few different reasons for that. One is that, remember I was talking about the substantial increase in electronic circulation? Well, electronic materials you do not have overdue fines with electronic materials. So inevitably, if you have a huge increase in electronic circulation, and people are shifting to that format, that's going to reduce your fine revenue over time, and that's across the board nationwide, something that libraries have seen. And that's part of why fines have not continued to be a sustainable revenue source for libraries. For us, since fall of 2018, we have not charged late fines on children's items. So obviously when we stopped doing that, it decreased our fine revenue. This year, in 2020, when we implemented our new integrated library system, our library management software, we saw further reduction in fine revenue. And the reason for that was because in our new library system, there is a feature called auto renewal. So if the item is eligible to be renewed, meaning nobody else has requested it, it will renew, and it will prevent minute fines from building up on people's accounts, which is really good. And it's a feature that people love because it's forgiving, right? If nobody has requested it, you won't be penalized for being a little bit delinquent on returning that item. So those three things have contributed to a drop in revenue as far as fines go for us. So we took in just over $5,000 in fine revenue in 2019, which is down from $8,500 in 2018, which makes sense, right? Because we stopped charging fines on children's material in 2018. Currently, we definitely spend more collecting fines than we generate in revenue from collecting fines. And this is another reason that many libraries have decided to go fine free, from small libraries to very large libraries, because we spend and budget for approximately $3,000 per year in equipment fees and transaction fees to collect fines. And this doesn't even include the substantial time that it takes in terms of staff time to talk to people about their fines and process late fines. So with only taking in $5,000 a year and spending already the $3,000 in transaction and equipment, we know we have to be spending more than we're collecting. So that's a little bit about fines at our library currently and historically. When I brought this up, I think it was in March, which seems like decades ago, given everything that has happened. I think that I needed to provide a little bit more context for you guys about kind of other libraries' approaches to fines and sort of what the trends are and why people or libraries go fine free and that kind of thing. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about what case studies and research have shown with libraries who eliminate fines and why they do it. So fines have been shown to not have any impact on return rates. And that's something that's a common misconception about fines. There's this removing barriers to access white paper that I have up on your screen is a really frequently cited source on this topic. And it concludes that several decades of research on this topic has shown that small fines have no impact on return rates. In fact, it can actually eliminating fines, and the libraries that have done that, it's had the opposite effect. So Chicago Public Library is one of the large library systems that has eliminated fines, and when they did that, they saw a 240% increase in returns. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that people, could actually use the library again. So they decided to come back because of that. St. Paul Public Library recently, I want to say, I think it was 2018, they eliminated fines and they saw an increase in their circulation and an increase in their new card registrations. So another thing that case studies and research has shown is that fines do disproportionately impact low-income residents and children. And so lower income residents might be afraid of incurring debt, and that means that some of them will avoid using their library. If the chance of being minor, even delinquent on a minor scale means that they could incur debt, they'll avoid using it. Research done by libraries who have gone fine-free has shown that low-income patrons that do not have the ability to pay fines are the most likely to be barred from using their library due to late fines. And there's also just a lot of shame that comes with incurring fines for people that prevent folks from returning to use their library. I mean, some people would rather just keep their book than have to face the librarian and the shame of being delinquent on an item and paying for it. I like this quote from the Chicago Public Library because I think it sums it up pretty good. Finally, I will end on the American Library Association has been very clear on the issue of fines in public libraries, and they've called for libraries to eliminate fines. So in 2019, they actually issued a resolution that urges libraries to scrutinize their practices of imposing fines on library patrons and actively move towards eliminating them. And it urges governing bodies of libraries to strengthen funding support for libraries so they are not dependent on monetary fines as a necessary source of revenue. And that is my last slide on fines. And I have one more revenue related item. And I'm willing to continue, or I can stop and we can talk about this.
Well, I don't remember exactly what I said previously when this subject came up, but public records will show that. So I apologize if I repeat myself, but I think it's clear with your statistics on both sides that maybe the time has come. My only thought is that as a board member trying to get the most communication, the most goodwill for our announcement, and I just ask that we if we do decide to do that, that we strategically announce it at perhaps around the same time as the library reopens to try to improve efforts to get the public to come back when we deem it safe. I think that would help as just the strategic timing of this.
I'm on the same page as you, Steve, which is why I asked to add the third agenda item.
I agree with everything Steve said. I just want to touch back and make sure that we aren't misrepresenting our librarians and that our librarians have not purposely shamed anybody in their fines.
Absolutely not. But it's the feeling that it could happen. That's the preventing people, not the fact that it may or may not have. Yeah.
I agree. I just want to make sure that that's clear to the public
Yes.
who may be participating in this meeting.
Yes. Just a commonly cited reason for not wanting to return your stuff.
I think we have to also consider that this is a permanent decision, because reenacting fines would never, ever, ever be a good idea. So I think we have to, just make sure that we are all on board 100% forever and ever.
Has there been any case studies where a library has tried to reinstate that ever in your research, Carissa?
Not that I have seen.
Carissa, can you jump back a few slides to the map of where there are no fines?
Yes.
So it's not really big in this region, it appears, to not have fines. So we might be a leader.
I don't want to misspeak because I don't know for sure, but I don't know for sure of many libraries in ND that are completely fine free. So I think you would be correct.
But it is very common throughout the country. It's just in the Midwest. It's not as common as along the coastlines and the Great Lakes area.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, are you asking for us to hash out the fines right now, or do you have more to share with on this topic?
I have one other revenue slide, which is a great piece of news, which is that we do qualify for state aid in 2021. So I just wanted to point that out to you guys, and that's actually a thing that I was hammering out last Friday. So your qualification for state aid, or our qualification, is based on the average 3-year average of funds levied needing to, and the amount levied in a given year being greater than the 3-year average, excuse me. So to qualify in 2021, amount levied in 2020 had to be more than the 3-year average, and it is. So we qualify for approximately $31,000 of state aid in 2021. So that is on your drafted budget in the revenue lines. It's intergovernmental. So I just wanted to point that out because I don't know that that was apparent to all of us. It definitely wasn't to me until I started talking to the state library recently. So I'm done with that section. So I will keep going and I can talk about cost reduction. So you asked about cost reduction, and you pointed out some of the areas already that I noted that had substantial reductions. So technology, to dive into that a little bit more, we are able to make that kind of a reduction by partnering with some lab laptops. So we have a set of lab laptops that we've used on and off for programming, and the use that we're having with them right now currently, feel like we can partner with our IT department and have a group of laptops that are funded by the IT department and not the library specifically. So we were able to see some cost reduction there. We have about, I think it's 8 lab laptops. And so the IT department is going to build a larger group, I think 20 lab laptops, and we would be able to use those for programming. So that partnership was a big chunk of it. Another thing was
You
that—
can't say that phrase too many times, Carissa.
Sorry, say that again?
You can't say that phrase too many times.
Oh.
What kind of laptops are they?
The lab laptops?
That's it.
Okay. Oh, okay. Nope. So that was part of it. The other part of it was some things that were in our technology line, like some of our maintenance and things like that, we moved to other lines. So Alana, you had asked about telephone. So we had those things residing in technology and moved them to the correct line this year, because I worked with the IT director to look at all the lines that include technology, which is more than just the technology line. It's service agreements and it's our phone. So we moved budgeted amounts to different lines, and that's part of why there's some reduction in technology too. It wasn't all just cutting out of computers and things like that. So for example, we lease all of our printers in the library, and we had not been coding that expense the way that the rest of the city does it. It needed to go into service agreements, for example. So some of that resulted in that reduction. The other piece of it that I put on your sheet of notes that I gave you, and that was available for the public in your packet, we did eliminate $2,800 in maintenance cost for the vending machine, because I think that I think that the vending machine's utility has run its course. I don't feel like it was the right tool, because like I think I've mentioned to you guys before, it's not a tool that you can use to pick a book that you want. It's like a vending machine. You can only get the item in the front. And so I don't think it has utility for us at this point as an outreach tool. I think that I almost could spend less having a staff person go out into Cashwise every week for an hour than I do having people loading this machine. And when we have opportunities for our staff to have FaceTime with the public, that is a much better outreach tool and use of time than this machine, which really doesn't facilitate what you might think it would, which is it doesn't actually allow you to, pick an item that you want. So it's not really a tool that's helping us circulate items, and I don't feel that it's really marketing us anymore. I think it, is a fine decision at the time, sure. I think I would like us to, I would rather have staff out doing a pop-up table somewhere than troubleshooting and filling the vending machine. So I want to point that out because I wanted you to know that that was part of what was reduced in the technology line. And also, I think that what we can do is sell it. I have looked into that, and so we can make money off of the machine too. But I think it's time to put our efforts elsewhere. So that was part of that too, and I did want to mention that. Furniture and equipment.
Can I go back to technology for a second?
Yep, absolutely.
So, do you think moving forward $25,000 is going to be an adequate technology budget for the library?
That's a good question. I do think that it will vary. And the reason that I say that is because typically, and I've worked in this line before because that was part of my job previously, when the IT director and I have worked on this line, we try to even out the expense over time. So it's all built on computer replacement cycles, which are typically 4 years. And so sometimes that can become uneven. So we'll try to replace things early or push it off to even it out. And I do think there's still going to be work that has to be done there. So there could be an increase in subsequent years. But I do think that partnering with some of those shared computers, over time, that'll still help us keep it level. We wouldn't add those back in unless there's a great need to do that. But we have made efforts to keep it level already. And we started doing that when I was in my previous position. So
I guess my concern, and this is my first time going through a full budget process with you, is if you decrease your budget by 50%, and then next year how resistant are they going to be to add back to that budget category if and when you need it?
I think it would all depend on what and why we would be asking for it, because if there was a special project, we would have to make that justification just like we would for any major increase in the line. But I do know that what we did to come up with this was look at the replacement cycle. And so I don't think there's going to be any major spike based on the replacement cycle because we have made efforts to even it out over the years, but there are changes as we go along with adding or modifying staff and that sort of thing that impact when things get replaced or numbers. So, I mean, right now it's a little hard to predict because I don't necessarily know what kind of technology project might make it increase in the future. But I would say too, technology would be an area that if we did have a major initiative or idea that we wanted to implement, that is a area where grants could definitely be used and applied because, it is a ongoing expense, but at the same time, it's not the same as you can't really fund staffing with a grant, but you can often get, technology with a grant and that sort of thing. So I guess I would say I don't know what projects we're going to be doing years down the line at this point, but I do know that our ongoing technology costs with the computers that we have them on a cycle, and we have tried to even out that cycle so that there is not a spike. And this reduction is the result of moving things to their correct lines, partnering on the lab laptops, and the elimination of maintenance costs from the vending machine. And I should also mention this too, here to speak to your point even more, Jody. Sometimes we do have a piece of equipment that is very infrequently replaced, but it comes up in a cycle, right? So, and sometimes that can really increase your budget. And actually this year is a good example of that because this past year for 2020, I had planned to replace our microfilm reader. which you don't have to replace that often. I don't even know that we would have an established replacement cycle offhand that that IT would know of. We'd have to devise one actually, but that is like a $10,000+ expense, but you don't do it that often. So yeah, sometimes when you have a piece of equipment like that does come up, sometimes it is going to increase. But if you don't have that, you don't just, we don't want to just put that in for no reason if we don't have a use for it.
Sure.
I'll move on. So then furniture and equipment. Furniture and equipment also had a substantial decrease, and that was actually after when I went back to revise, when I got the total number of all the things that we initially requested, and I went back to revise, in knowing the unspent funds that we would have as a result of our COVID closure, I felt like what I should do is take some of the cubicles that I had budgeted for in 2021 and purchase them in 2020 and not in 2021. So that's how I was able to reduce the cost there. Yeah, and then history room, we talked about this and the historical center. So I did not include the $2,500 for supplies. The budget for a part-time staff person that had the title of historical center assistant is still in the budget. That did not get taken out. But what myself and the library service managers would like to do with that is to repurpose that position to be an outreach assistant. And that person would do things like our book deliveries to our senior facilities and our book deliveries to our daycares. One need that we are going to have over time in terms of FTE is going to be concerted FTE for outreach specifically, because we don't have dedicated staff for that right now, and we're doing the best that we can to provide materials offsite to people. And even the addition of a part-time staff person in outreach would be extremely beneficial, to have somebody that can do those deliveries and have a dedicated hours for that. So that is a really important need that we have, or that the community has. So I wanted to point that out. That position is in here, but we feel that we should repurpose it. I think that is the end of the cost reductions that things that I was gonna talk about. So what other questions do you guys have, or things do you have for me on that topic?
Krista, you've done a lot of work on this, and I appreciate all the slides and especially the graphs at the beginning to really show us how the library has changed and evolved recently. I do have one more question, and I maybe should have asked it when we were talking about salaries and FTEs.
Yes.
And I'm not even sure that I understand how it works, but there's also a fairly dramatic decrease under line 240, workforce safety insurance. And in my very small understanding of it, I'm not sure, like, shouldn't that be increased as the salaries and FTEs increase?
It's a good question. Let me look at our 2020. I will have to ask about that. Why don't I write that down as a question before I bring the next draft to you guys? Because I don't know the answer to that. I don't know why that went down.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're not under budgeted there, because that's something that has to be paid.
Yes. Yeah. Yep, I'll get the answer to that. should I keep going? Talk about, so our reserve fund and the difference between the amount that we have levied in recent years and our operating costs, which we had Tina Fisk here in April with us to talk about this. So what Eric and Tina and Jim and I talked about at our meeting was, what is the solution to the issue of the mills being removed from the library and us subsequently having eaten into our reserve fund. And so ultimately what Tina proposed is that over the next several years, we will see a gradual increase in our mills. And in the meantime, between when there's still a gap between the amount that we're levying and our operating costs, depleting our reserve fund, which we do need in case of, emergencies, the city would move funds from the general fund reserve each year to make up the difference. And so over the next 3 to 5 years, what Jim suggested that I do is that I'll work with the finance department to put a projection together to get us up to a level where we're funded so we don't have this deficit. And he thought that could probably happen in 3 to 5 years. And in the meantime, funds would be moved from the general fund reserve to us so that we don't deplete our reserve fund. Because like Tina said at our meeting, and Eric has said this before too, I think it's my understanding that the board at the time believed that those funds would be returned, to the library. It wasn't like they thought the money was just gone. So I think that the city is on the same page with us that that money needs to be returned to us. And so to make up the difference, we can't increase mills overnight like that. So to make up the difference, the money would be moved from the general fund reserve.
I think you want to stop what's playing.
Is that something the commission has to vote on?
I'm not sure what the next steps with that and the commission are, and I will bring that question to Tina between now and our next review of the budget draft, if that sounds like an okay plan to you guys.
Thank you for taking the initiative on that conversation.
Absolutely, yep. Does anybody have any other questions about that? Any other questions in general? And this will be my last question slide. So, like I said, the next step in this will be is I will take the questions that you guys had, get answers to them, and then I will bring another draft of this to you on July 9th to approve. So I'm not asking for a motion or anything tonight. This was just so that we'd have time to talk about it and you could review it, give me feedback, and ask questions. So
If I think of any that I can't think of tonight, I'll email you and CC the others.
that sounds perfect.
Okay, so we're ready to move on to the next agenda item. It is the one we added at the beginning of our meeting. And Carissa, maybe you can just detail what that agenda item is before you start discussing it.
Yes. So over the last week, we had a little bit of an issue with getting May financials fully input, and so those came back this week, so I had a chance to actually look at where we in expenditures this year and more fully understand the impact of our closure. So, and I'm bringing that up because it relates to something that you brought up, Steve, when we were having our fine discussion. Is I do think it would be a good idea for us to stop collecting fines in 2020 for the remainder of the year. I think what you said, Steve, about it being a way to welcome people back is part of it. And I also think part of it too is just that it's a really hard financial and economic time for people right now. So it makes a lot of sense to lift that burden even more. And so it's not going, we wouldn't collect a lot more in fines this year because we're halfway through the year. So if we collected 5,000 in 2019, tops we would collect 2,500, and I don't think it would be even anywhere near that because, like I said, we've started our auto renew in 2020. So I think it'd be less than that. So again, I'm bringing this up to you because I think that we have unspent funds that can cover the amount that we would have taken in, that minimal amount. The other thing that I should say about this too is that one thing we should consider is with this is, do we want to waive existing fines on people that, for example, might have fines on their card and they might not be blocked, or they might have fines to the point where they are blocked? We did some research into this, and we have about 450 patrons that are blocked right now. And in total, so not just the people that are blocked, but in total, we have approximately $17,000 in outstanding fines on people's accounts across the board. Not surprising. I actually thought it might even be more than that. Last year, when we moved to our new ILS, I don't know if Steve and Larry remember this, but I brought a proposal to eliminate fines on people's accounts that were expired because we could not remove expired people from our database until they were wiped clear, and that totaled probably $70,000. But the thing is that, and this is, I think, what I remember talking to the board about last year, is that we are not going to see that money, because I mean, we can assess fines all we want, but what the research has shown is a lot of people just don't come back. So we can assess it and it exists on their account. It doesn't mean that we're going to be able to collect it. So 17,000 might sound like a lot, but it's not really revenue that we're probably going to see. So, and I say that because most libraries consider this when they are going to eliminate fines, because the people that are currently blocked can then come back and then continue to not have to worry about being blocked due to overdue fines. It takes about, I should point this out too, is that what I suggest that we do is that we continue, if we do this, we continue to charge people for completely lost, they never come back items or damaged items. All of this is saying is that people just would not accrue late fines. So we'd still get money for items that never, or we'd charge their account. So if somebody never brought a book back, they would still be blocked. We currently block people at a delinquency of $10 or more right now.
But what would, if we eliminate late fees, when do you determine when an item is lost?
Yep, so it takes 28 days from the time that it's overdue for it to turn to lost, so about a month. If you are overdue and you don't bring your item back in a month, then it turns to lost and your account gets charged for the replacement cost of that item.
also after the item auto renews as well? Just a clarification.
No, because then you'd have a new due date. You know, it would be overdue from whatever your final due date was. Yeah. So what I should clarify, I think, what I'm asking for. What I think at this point I'm asking for is the board to approve to direct me to bring back a revised policy to you on July 9th that would revise policies that have language in them about fines that we charge, to modify that so that they would be eliminated. And then I would bring that back to you on July 9th to review, because that is we have a specific policy on late fines in particular, and then we have other language in another, I think, our borrowers policy about that. So I guess we don't have those policies revised, so you can't approve them tonight. So that's why, but I think that I would like to know one way or the other whether you're asking us to revise them, and then I would bring them back to you on July 9th for approval.
And we haven't been charging late fees since the shutdown of everything. I think in February, at our February meeting was when we said we were going to table late fees.
So yes, and it's a little, how it actually works and what we actually did in the system was we just extended due dates. So we just didn't have anything due until June 10th. And we do have things that are due now because our book drops are open. So when our book drops opened on June 10th, that was everybody's due date for the buildup of items that were out before. So that's how we did that. We didn't go in and eliminate sort of fines on items. We just made it so nobody had a due date.
With the way it's working right now with just book drop-offs, the library physically being closed, do we think it's the right time this particular month, or is it possibly a better time in a few months when we know possibly a longer term new normal?
So my feeling is that it should coincide with when the building is open. And I can talk a little bit about that now because I think it does relate. But I think that with our custodial support in place, and if you recall, in our plan and the different conditions that had to be met in order for us to open the doors, which is not the same thing as events in person and meeting rooms, all that, but to allow people back in, we were looking at 6 things is what I had outlined. So obviously the conditions, and we had to have continuous access to PPE and sanitization, which we do now. Staff sanitization protocols, which we have now. Sufficient staffing levels, which we have currently. Implementation of physical distancing measures, we're still working on that. And then increased contract custodial services, which with the amendment, we would have that soon as well. So a date that I would estimate that we could be ready based on things that we still need to get in the library, like plexiglass and things like that. In my head, I think that probably in a month, we could be ready to reopen, obviously in a very modified way. And we've already started doing that. So forcing people to distance, we have roped off like pull tape to force people into lines. We're gonna we've already taken away a lot of our computers in preparation for this. We've moved a lot of furniture already. So Kirsten moved a lot of furniture. That's why she's left. So I think that we could be ready by then. I will say a little bit more about that because So the city as a whole, we've been following a phased plan based on the state's plan, which is a color-coded plan. I don't know if you've watched this, but the state has been at what they are calling a green phase, which the next phase they call blue, which is like a new normal phase. So in the green phase, city buildings can reopen. City Hall is opening on Monday. The fire department had opened as of last Monday, the 15th, to the public, obviously with measures in place is the caveat with all this. Right now, we would not be ready to open this week because we don't have our contract custodial support and we don't have all the things installed, like I mentioned. And I also think I'm comfortable with looking at a month from now, maybe like the week after our next board meeting, I think would be something I'd be comfortable saying at this point. I guess I have learned that it takes a long time to work with some of the vendors that we've needed to work with to get supplies and things. So, but things are moving along in terms of that. I did hear that the Bismarck Public Library is opening on July 6th. At this point, I do not know about the Fargo Library. I will have to check on that. So to circle back to the discussion of fines, I guess I would say that if a policy was brought forward to the board next month, and if it were to be approved, I think it would be reasonable that we could implement it, and that would be close to our reopening date, and it could go into effect and coincide with the reopening.
My personal opinion is that you should rework the policy. I think it can only benefit our community to rework that.
The fine policies?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Yep.
Does anybody else have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think if I thought Eric would have any questions.
Carissa, did that come up in your budget meetings when you were in conversation with Eric in person? Or
I did tell them that my budget didn't include fine revenue. So yes, but I mean, it's such a small, truthfully, it is a really small fraction. So it really didn't dominate the conversation at all because it's not sustaining us in any way. So yeah. Is that what you're asking? The impact of the revenue? Is that what you mean?
I was just wondering if you could, Steve was concerned that Eric might have any questions. And so I thought maybe in your conversations that had been addressed.
About fine revenue, right? That's what you mean. Yeah. Yep. Like I said, not really. And I did talk about it at our budget meeting. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily saying he would have an issue with it. I don't know. I'm comfortable, but I'm not 100% comfortable making a final decision without all of us here. I can be persuaded one way or the other, I guess.
I don't think that you need to make a final decision tonight. I think what I should do is, if you want, I will revise the policy and bring it to the next meeting. And hopefully everybody can be at that meeting. Because like I said, I have nothing for you to approve officially tonight because we didn't have time to actually revise the policy. So I think what I'm just looking for is whether you want to direct me to do that. So I just wanted, before we do all that, I wanted to make sure that I have your support in the idea of it. And then you guys could talk about it next month and actually see the policy.
You have my support.
Yes, I definitely don't think there's any harm at all in putting the formal policies together and bringing that to the full board.
Okay, I will plan to do that then. The other piece of item number 3 is that I wanted to talk about unspent funds and what myself and library service managers would like to do with some of our unspent funds. So one area that I talked about that we started doing cost projections on when we were planning for our reopening was our materials lines, because we cannot retroactively go back and order the amount that we couldn't order while we were closed, and we could not order while we were closed because we couldn't receive materials while we were closed. And we also, I think part of it too was that this year we hired a library service manager who was not in place for 2 months out of the year. So we really have a large portion of our materials budget, and probably other lines too, that are going to be substantially underspent. And one area that we know and did a cost projection on was our materials lines, so our book and our AV. And with where we are halfway through the year, we estimate that we'll have approximately $48,000 left in our materials lines as a result of our closure and the other factor that I mentioned. So part of it will be, needed for the next 6 months of our contract cleaning. So that's $3,900. Fines that I just mentioned, $1,500, $2,000, because we know what we took in last year and that it will be reduced. What we would like to do is, and I mentioned that part of the reduction in our furniture line was that I had some cubicles budgeted for 2021, but on looking at reducing the overall cost, I thought, well, we should just reroute those and take the substantial unspent funds that we know that we're going to have and purchase those items in 2020. So that's what I would like to do. And I would also, so the cubicles, there are a few other desks that over the years we would need to purchase. And then I talked to you guys when we were talking about our remodeling work and moving things around so that we could make a technical services workroom. Do you remember that discussion when we were looking at the contractor who's going to do the remodeling or the painting and carpeting in our rooms upstairs? So we need some shelving in that room to facilitate a better workflow. And so I feel like rather than planning those out and making us add those as expenses years down the line, we should repurpose funds that we know are going to be unspent in 2020 for those furniture items. And I am working with to get quotes for some of that. I would like to propose that we can repurpose up to $25,000 for furniture such as that. So added together with the cleaning and the fines, that would be about $30,000. But we know we're going to have even more than that, and that'll be good. That'll be savings. That'll go into our reserve fund, which is our emergency fund. So that's fine. And I do think, like I said, to our programming lines and some other lines, that we weren't incurring expenses for those for a substantial amount of the year. And the people that spend in those lines, some of them were not employed for the first part of the year. So we just have some underspent lines. The one that we did the most analysis on, because we track it so closely, is our material lines. So that's how I have a firm number on what we know we're not gonna spend and what we are gonna be able to spend for the rest of the year. So I guess I would just like to let you know that that's what I would like to do with it, so that we can avoid having to put that funds in future budget years. And we'll ultimately still, I believe, save money and be able to put money into reserve.
Carissa, are there any unforeseen expenses that can come with the reopening of the library after things return to a new normal? I would hate to deplete ourselves of any funds that we need to be spent.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So most of the emergency funds that, and I call them that because things that we did not foresee, so plexiglass, cleaning supplies, there are some technology items that we bought when we knew we were going to do this remote programming, for example. We're coding those to lines that aren't even the library's lines, because the city has, when there's a declared emergency, in order to not have all of those, there's a lot of unexpected expenses in other departments. So in order for us all to not have our budgets impacted, what we ended up doing is we track all of that, and then hopefully we can get reimbursed. So it all got tracked. And when I coded those expenses, they didn't even come out of the library's budget. We had our own separate emergency funds for those. So I'm not concerned about that. I think that I can't think of things that I haven't already ordered that would change substantially in terms of like space reconfiguration or things like that. So I guess not that I can think of, but what I will say is that we still would have extra funds, unspent funds, even with doing some of this stuff this year instead of spreading it out and putting it in future budgets.
Lana, forgive me, but I'm good for about 10 more minutes.
Okay.
Then that's going to rob us of a quorum.
Okay. I do have one. It sounds like we're moving on. I just want to make sure that I understood what you said, Carissa. So it sounds like even if maybe those funds that have been spent need to be reimbursed, there would still be funds available as far as you understand for what you're requesting. Okay.
Yes.
I just wanted to clarify that.
Yep. So, and I just wanted to let you know that I would like to purchase some furniture that will be paid for with unspent funds. So if we're going forward and we're seeing bills coming in for furniture, I just wanted to give you a heads up about that. I don't know if I'll have to do a formal budget amendment, because this is such a weird year that I also, like, as far as our budget trend goes, I don't really want to change our materials line going forward. I think we just have to recognize that there's going to be some unspent in some lines, and we'll know what we did. There's just going to be some weirdnesses, I think, because of our closure. And so, yeah, but I will seek guidance from the finance department and from Tina on that, because I don't know what the best option is, because in some cases, as we've already done this year, we've talked about budget amendments. So
can I ask a super fast, maybe naive question? Would this be a good opportunity to catch up on our Odin subscription then?
I don't know if we can pay out years with that.
But I mean, could we make the gap smaller? Like we're paying, are we paying $7?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Could we catch up to the 20?
We'd have to pay that this year and then also jump for next year then, though. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So we'd have to increase from 7 to 20. And that's
I think Odin has done us a big favor by incrementally increasing it. And so I think that could bite us if we paid it up front.
Okay.
Carissa, are you looking for, I'm sorry to cut you off, Jody. Carissa, are you looking for a motion of any kind?
I think I would like a motion that you would authorize me to repurpose unspent COVID funds up to $25,000. That would, I think, just be good for us to have and make sure that all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. Wow. Sorry, 7:30.
Okay, so you're requesting 25,000, and I just want to make sure my notes are right, that there is up to 48,000 that is not spent. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
In materials budget. Yep.
Okay.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, there's a motion to approve.
Accountants hate unspent money.
There's a motion to approve spending of $25,000 on the table. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Carissa, we have 2 items left: director's report and other business.
I'd like to move postponing the director's report until the next board meeting.
Sure. Yep. The only other, that's totally fine. The only thing that I do want to say though is that the date that I have in mind for when we could reopen would be the week of the 13th. I think that is realistic, and that would be in line with the other city buildings that have already opened. I mean, that would push us back, but we also were different. You know, we're a unique space that is used in a unique way. So it's taken longer for us to get some of those things in place, and we didn't have all the custodial support that we needed initially either. So, but I just want you to know that that's what is in my head, not publicly announced yet, but when we do publicly announce it, we'll make it really clear what the parameters are that the public are to follow when they enter the building and things like that. So that's I'll leave it at that, but yes, we can postpone.
Do we need a second on that? Is that a formal board action? Yes, Larry nodded yes. So Larry has made a motion to postpone the director's report until the next meeting. Is there a second?
I'll second it. I'm sure next month it'll be twice as exciting.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor of postponing the director's report, please say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion passed. It sounds like we may have covered other business. Is that true? Carissa, do you have anything to add under other business? No? Is there a motion to adjourn? Larry's pointing at Jody. That's how it looked on my screen.
I'm in the minutes way too much. That's all I can say.
So
I'll move to
gonna adjourn the meeting.
Go ahead.
Adjourned.
Thank you
all for calling in.
Okay.
Thank you.
Goodbye and good luck.
Bye.
Thanks, Carissa.
Thank you.
The recording has stopped.